everybody, and welcome back to Motorcycles and PODcakes, the official podcast of Motorcycles and Pancakes. You can find all things Motorcycles and Pancakes on the YouTubes or on the Instagrams. And if you want to check out this little podcast thing we got going on right now, by the way, you can now hear it and listen to it on Spotify. Just look for Motorcycles and PODcakes and look for the little blue logo, and there you go. So today, we were lucky enough to track down the number one most requested guest to have on this podcast right now. Yeah, it's only episode 3, but this guy's kind of been blowing up, and everybody's been, when are you going to have this guy on? And I don't know how we were able to schedule it because he's a busy dude, and he's retired. Yes, that's right. So he's very busy of bonbons and soap operas and maybe some motorcycle riding, mountain climbing, hiking, being a great grandpa and all stuff like that. I know him as my dad, and everybody else out here knows him as Papa Cakes. Papa Cakes, welcome to Motorcycles and PODcakes.
Howdy dowdy. So I've actually been retired for over 15 years now. Had plenty of opportunities to go play and do all that fun stuff you're talking about. So
right.
Cool.
That is pretty cool. So 15 years. I remember the day you actually called me and you were sitting in Delta Park and you're like, yeah, I'm done.
Oh, yeah. Couldn't take the rush hour traffic anymore.
Right. Who could?
It was... Portland traffic is really bad.
Yeah, and if you don't know the Portland area, North Portland, where I-5 is getting into Vancouver, it's like a real bottleneck, and it just becomes astronomically dumb.
Yeah, I live in a bedroom community of Vancouver, Washington, across the Columbia River.
Right.
But
you're a foreigner.
But everybody over there in Vancouver is going to be pissed when I say bedroom community because they like to have their own identity, you know. So, but it is.
Okay.
40,000 people a year come across that bridge into Portland for work.
Yeah, I'm dying over here. So, somebody this week, well, within the last week, just had a birthday. I know you really want me to bring that up. You know, so you went from 73 to 74. Boom.
Good math, yeah.
I know 2 + 2 is 9. So 74 years. I really want to get into the motorcycle riding, and also I want to find out if I'm going to learn anything new more about my pops here. So why don't we just rewind here and start from the beginning? And why don't you tell everybody kind of where you're born, raised, what you were like as a kid, as a terror?
Pretty boring.
Oh, I don't think so.
Of course, you can do the math, but I was born in 49 in Portland. I always said I wish my parents would have waited a little bit more because 50 sounds better than 1949 does. Actually, I've got a little dry throat I've been following you sucking your dust for the last few hours on these mountain rides, and my voice isn't working that well.
Yeah, that's right. We did. We went for like a 3-hour little ride before this whole thing.
Maybe I should grab that water.
Yeah, that's what it's there for.
So I was born in Portland. Basically... there's a suburb of southeast Portland is Milwaukee. Basically raised in that area, went to Milwaukee High School, all that fun stuff. Then, how detailed do you want? So,
well, I mean, growing up, so you were the middle of 3 kids.
Oh, yeah. My older brother, younger sister. Mm-hmm. My brother is kind of a legend around these parts, especially around the town of Estacada.
Right.
And, then my younger sister. So there were 3 of us, and,
So growing up post-World War II and all that jazz, growing up through the 50s and the 60s. So you got to live through a lot of the stuff. And then, like growing up, I remember you talked a little bit about some stuff in, Selwood, where you went to middle school or grade school?
Yeah, I went to grade school for just the 2 different stints, actually, for kindergarten and for 5th grade. Because, grandparents lived in Selwood, so that was really cool. Then, like I said, then back on to Milwaukee High School.
Right. Where'd you go to junior high?
Actually, out in East Portland, actually, at what is the name of it nowadays? I don't even know.
Okay, what was the name of it when you were there?
I think it was Joseph Junior High, I think.
Joseph Junior High. Okay, so East Portland, that's where you did your thing, and you came over and you hit the Milwaukee High School.
Yep, Milwaukee Mustangs.
All right.
And, of course, I was too busy playing with motorcycles and cars rather than being a real active in high school. I was tall. Everybody wanted me to, be on the basketball team and stuff. I was just about almost 6'5". In fact, I got to 6'5" in the 7th grade.
Nice.
And everybody says, hey, you should play basketball. Didn't have time for that stuff. I only wanted to do mechanical things. I wanted to work on motorcycles. I wanted to work on cars, which I had. In those days, what was really interesting is this was in the, early 60s. You could buy an old Harley for $50 or less. I think back on that now, and it's like, holy crap. So I bought a flathead 45 Harley, loved working on it, and then...
What year was that? Or how old were you when you did that?
15. And then my good friend Paul, he thought it was really cool, to be cruising around on a Harley. And then he found one in a case, literally in a trunk, one of those big trunks with the straps and stuff you see.
Right.
He found one in pieces.
So a true basket case.
Yeah, really. So we put that together, and he loved it, had a blast. And, you think back on those days, and you go, how did we live through that? Because we would do cool things, which we thought were cool to the motorcycles. They're absolutely stupid. And we almost, for example, who needs a front brake?
Okay. Yeah, so front brakes don't do anything on motorcycles.
Who needs a front brake? So we're, then on those heavy bikes, you're cruising down the road, and if you have to put the brakes on very hard, the back brake doesn't do a whole lot of anything. So.
Right.
Good times, though. I had the Harley 45. I loved it. Those old units had a separate transmission from the engine.
Right.
And I can't even remember where I picked it up, but I found one of those old 3-wheel police bikes somewhere in town and bought it for one reason, and one reason only, is the transmission had reverse.
I remember the story.
So it was awesome to be on a heavy bike like that, and being able to back it up whenever you wanted to.
Right.
Of course, it was a suicide shift. Tell you what, when I got my driver's license at 7 a.m. in the morning, I'm at the DMV waiting for them to open. And in those days, they had a highly sophisticated test system to get your motorcycle license.
I'm sure they did.
It was the guy stood inside the building talking to other people, and he said, go drive around the parking lot. I could see he really wasn't even paying attention.
Right.
Came back, and he said, okay, here's your license. Not like today.
Right. Yeah, today you got to take classes.
So my buddy Steve Wick and I, he got on the back, and I rode that thing until 1 o'clock in the morning.
With him on the back?
Yeah. It was crazy because, you have your driver's license. You can go anywhere you want to go, do anything you want to do. And it was really, except the hard part is suicide clutch means you have 1 foot on the clutch while you're stopped. The other foot's on the ground, which is totally fine until your friend decides to move around on the back and tip the bike the other way.
Oh, no.
And you have to put your foot down and,
pop the clutch.
You jump out into the street, But you learn how to deal with that. And there was a lot of fun. Manual, shifter on the side of the gas tank.
Right.
Foot clutch. It was awesome. And I actually rode that to high school.
Okay. That was your DD, your daily driver?
Yeah, So I didn't know what to think. Back in those days, the teachers and everything thought, oh, that guy's a criminal. He's riding a Harley, and all that kind of stuff. And they didn't realize I was probably the straightest guy in the whole school.
Yeah.
But back to, I kind of wanted to mention how I got into motorcycles because.
Okay, we'll get there already.
When I was a little kid, my Uncle Hub, was a flat track racer, had a national number. So we'd always, of course, as little kids, we'd be going to his races all the time and talk about how cool that was.
Absolutely.
When you're a little kid. And so, that gets your interest up. My dad was into motorcycles. He always had, not necessarily when we were really young, but when he got older, he always had several motorcycles at the same time.
Every week.
He loved riding. He loved, getting out and stopping for lunch or dinner and talk and BSing with folks. He was really outgoing and well received by people. So at an early age, I was really involved in motorcycles, and then riding a motorcycle to high school. And that was awesome. Just a quick side note on my dad. He like I said, he was real outgoing and everything. And going down the Oregon coast one time, and he pulled into a pub in the evening, walked in, and he's, like he is, saying hi to everybody. And finally he realized there were two dudes sitting over at the table. He sat down with them and actually spent a couple hours with them, Paul Newman and Henry Fonda.
Oh, no kidding.
They were filming Sometimes a Great Notion down on the beach, down at the Oregon coast. And he just sat down and BS with them for the evening. That's just the kind of guy he was.
Did he have any idea who they were? Or is he just like, there's a couple dudes, I'm going to hang out?
Well, I'm not sure he did at first, but then he obviously did.
Yeah.
But another quick side note about him is he rode a lot, and he liked to ride fast, and rode his entire life, and he never had a single accident.
No kidding.
He always thought that was really, really lucky. And the one accident he almost had, he was at the on-ramp on I-5 in Wilsonville, and he pulled out onto the on-ramp and started gassing it like he does, and he noticed something, or like he did, and then he noticed something wasn't quite right, and he pulled over, and his front axle was just ready to fall out.
Oh, dear Lord, that would have been a catastrophe.
Yeah, that was the closest thing. So anyhow, that's how I got into motorcycling. And of course, as the years went on, I'm, had the gap in between,
Yeah.
marriage, kids, and all that stuff.
Everybody has that gap.
And then got back into motorcycling again after that,
Right.
quite a bit. Although, in fact, my dad, again, bought you that beautiful little red Honda when you were what?
Third grade.
Third grade?
Yep. Go back to episode 2 with Travis. We talked about this.
Yeah.
I remember Mom, I don't know what I was doing. You and Mom were already divorced at the time. And I remember coming to the house, and it was in the garage. I know it was in the garage. I don't remember if it was covered or if the garage door was closed and you opened up the garage door, but there was some sort of like surprise reveal. And I remember Grandpa being there and being all excited about it and stuff. And then I remember just kind of learning how to get on it. But one of the things we talked with Travis is he took the top of the carburetor off with the spring on the inside, and you could adjust that spring to make it half throttle, full throttle, or whatever. And he was talking about, we're going to make this half throttle, And so he says, okay, I want to take this off, and the motor is going to get really loud. Keep the clutch in, but don't let the clutch out. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And I'm like, 10 minutes into my riding career, I might have ridden across the lawn a few times, maybe. And then I remember he did that, and the motor being so loud that I panicked and let go of the clutch.
Oh, God.
And I remember the bike taking off, doing this ghost ride thing. I'm on the back, on my back. And I remember we had the burnout mark in the front lawn for like a month or 2 months or something where that happened. I thought that was hilarious. But, yeah, that was the start of my riding career.
Yeah. Shortly after that, too, I remember you're going over some whoopties. I think we're out there by
Lewis and Clark.
Yeah, Lewis and Clark Park, and going over those whoopties, and something happened where you went over the handlebars.
Weird. That's what I tend to do a lot.
Yeah, when you get in your mountain bikes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember your arm. The handlebars went up and out to the grips, and then there's that bar across the handlebars. And I remember your arm went through that between the bars, and you and the bike flipped. And I thought, oh, broken arm. With his arms. But nope, no problem. Came out fine.
Just got up and started riding again. That place was so awesome. I seem to remember we went out there it feels like every weekend. we would go out there, and with the Siegfrieds, which were some family friends at the time. Mm-hmm. And I remember riding around with Jason and stuff, and then we'd always see Gene out there, who was like a pretty hotshot guy, and we yeah, we want to ride like him or whatever. I just remember that was awesome. Right?
Yeah, I love that. Having those sorts of places close by. But that's the problem with today's world. I guess it's just a matter of being overpopulated and everything. But we used to love going to places like that and just have a blast, and it's just right in town.
Right? Yeah, right down the street, essentially. Yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah, none of those places exist anymore.
Right.
But it's also just the same case for our motorcycle tracks that we had in town. Mm-hmm. We had fabulous flat track motorcycle racing at Sidewinders, which was really not far from where we are right now.
Yeah, I remember that.
And the Speedway out along the Columbia River. It's a Speedway track. And then there were other various racetracks around town. None of them are here anymore. There was a racetrack at Jansen Beach, which is right where you cross the Columbia River on I-5. There was a great dirt track there, and Portland Speedway. They're all gone, So it's really, we had so many more opportunities to go for little rides like at Lewis and Clark Park, or go to the races. Like my brother and I and my dad would go every Friday night to Sidewinders, dirt track racing. Yeah, we're talking big bikes, not motocross dirt. We're talking flat trackers.
Right, going sideways around the corners.
Yeah, exactly, and oh, God, we love that.
I remember as a kid going to the Sidewinders all the time. And I remember one day specifically, I remember there was a dude, I don't know what it was or what his number was or whatever, but he was a wheelie guy. And I remember he went around and rode a couple wheelies or something, like in between races or whatever, right? And that was kind of his thing. And I remember we went back to get whatever we were getting, hot dogs or Coke or whatever. And I remember we passed him. I don't remember if we stopped and talked to him, but I remember oh, that's him. And just thought that was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, it's funny how those guys have impressions in your mind, even when I was a kid,
Yeah.
In fact, my brother and I were in the track had a hill. You went up a hill, rounded a corner, and it came down the long hill to make the other curve at the bottom. And we were my brother and I were right up against the fence of the curve. And then, as I mentioned, our uncle was a national flat track racer, national number. You have to be pretty good to get a national number.
Yeah.
And he's coming down the track. He was riding Norton at the time, and coming down within just feet of us, and we're waving at him like crazy. And I think we distracted him just enough that he had a major crash right in that corner as he was going by us.
He wanted to wave at his kids, his nephews. Hey guys!
Yeah, but that was totally fun.
Yeah.
So now we have to just get out and get in the backcountry, which is fine, like we did all morning today.
Oh yeah, we'll get more into that kind of stuff here. I'm curious. You referred to your brother, my Uncle Rick, as kind of a legend. And
well, yeah,
it's not always a good thing when you're a legend, right? So I remember just stories growing up, and I remember, he's a logger, former logger. I guess he's retired now. He started that at 17 years old or something like that.
Yeah, he's very experienced. When he was working, he's in pretty high demand because he could do everything,
Yeah.
And, yep.
Well, I also remember
hard career.
I also remember there for a while, every time we had a family reunion, somebody else would show up and be like, "Hey, I'm Rick's kid," and you're like, "The family, come on in."
Yeah, there's a few of them around, from what I understand.
Yeah. Right. But I also remember Mom talking about, she went to a bar in Estacada once upon a time, and they carded her, and they saw the last name, and they go, "Oh, you any relation to Rick?" She's like, "Yeah, that's my brother-in-law." I was like, "We can't serve you here."
Well, what's a little bar fight once in a while?
Yeah, right. And didn't he just? I think you were telling me this. Like, we just found out he was doing kind of Fight Club stuff, like the movies.
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah. The only trouble is he waited. He pretty old,
Right.
considering how,
He's 2 years older than you, right?
a year and a half.
Year and a half. Okay.
So he's, but he was an athletic guy. He had good athletic skills, but of course, he didn't do anything in school like myself. Like I said, I was too busy working on cars and motorcycles.
Right.
But he was tough. He wouldn't take anything from anybody, and he wasn't afraid of any. This is kind of crazy switching over to Rick, but what the hell?
No,
But he never took any guff from anybody.
Right.
And it worked out great for me. And back in those days, I don't know what it's like nowadays, but in those days when freshmen went to high school, they got all kinds of crap the first day.
Mm-hmm.
They got pushed around by the seniors and the juniors and picked on, and it was
Bullied.
really, really tough. And it was great for me because I was Rick's brother.
Yeah.
Nobody touched me. So I actually went home, or after going to school for a while, going, why weren't these guys pushing me around like they were doing all the other freshmen and stuff? And it finally dawned on me after a while, now I know why, because they'd get punched out if they did.
Right. So I also seem to remember some infamous story about a bus after a football game.
Yeah, I just, like I said, he was not afraid of anybody or anything. And so we lived near the school, and after the football game, we're walking out of the parking area where they had the opposing team's buses, and we're walking down the side of the bus. We passed the front of the bus, the entrance door, and kept going down the side. Later on in the back part of the bus, there's one of the kids from the other school hanging out the open window, just giving us all kinds of crap. And so he never said a word. He just looked up at the guy, stopped, and he just did a 180 and casually walked back to the front of the bus, walked down the hallway of the bus to the back, punched the guy in the face, and then walked back off again. And it's like, never even bat an eye about it, but I shouldn't. I don't want to give the impression that he's some mean thug kind of guy. He's
right.
He's a really good guy and everything. But
I agree.
But he wasn't afraid of anyone or anything. So
right. That's the Uncle Rick that I remember growing up with.
But yeah, then as you mentioned, he started getting into doing these fights around town. I never went to one, but I heard a lot about it. Various taverns around town, and you could go and they would have these fights, and he did okay for a while, but until he got older, and then he would tell me, the last one I went to, I got knocked out, and then I finally realized that I shouldn't be doing this anymore.
Oh my God, he was in his 70s at that time, right?
Oh no.
Oh no,
I'd say in his maybe 50.
Oh okay,
something like that.
Yeah, he's like, I'm tapping out.
No, if he was 70, he wasn't getting getting very far in the ring with those guys.
Yeah, no, for real.
But anyhow, so that's my older brother.
Right.
My younger sister, Sharon. We just, another thing about having older brothers in high school is she was younger than us, and so nobody messes with your little sister.
Right.
So I think that's true for any younger sister anywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, we had a little incident too with a new kid in school that I don't need to get into the details, but he was doing something really weird involving my sister. So it didn't take Rick long to end that guy's career at our high school.
Right, yeah.
Rick caught up with him, and that was that, and he never came back to our high school again. And rightfully so. I don't, he was doing some weird stuff. So
I bet. Yeah, I know some of the little bit of the backstory, I think. So
yeah,
that's kind of wild. So me growing up, you were always into motorcycles, and Rick was always into motorcycles. So at what point? I mean, did you guys do growing up in the beginning? Were you guys riding a lot together? Were you?
Really, surprisingly enough, not that much. I had, like I said, I had 45, a flathead 45 in high school, and Rick didn't have a bike then. And then, we graduated high school, went our own ways,
Right.
And then he started getting his own bikes. He got, like a knucklehead Harley. Those are classics. They're just fabulous. And things like that. And a Triumph and a BSA. And he still has an old BSA Gold Star that he's got sitting under his house in crates. And
wild.
And another BSA also.
Yeah.
But he did a lot of riding. He was a really good rider because he scared the crap out of me. Like, we were up the Clackamas River one time, and there was a steep dirt hill, guardrail at the bottom, right on the edge of the road, the paved road. And there was a gap between the guardrail sections of 2-3 feet at the most. And he would get on his bike, and I think he was riding the Triumph at the time, but he would get on his bike and fly through that little gap and go up the hill, and steep hill, and then he would spin 180 around full throttle, come back down and shoot back through that little gap. And it was like, God. And then he'd get on the pavement and then figure eight on the pavement and stuff,
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God. I'd kill myself.
Yeah, I remember one of the first times I rode with him. We were on a road. I don't remember where we were going, but we were on a highway, and I remember he would come up on my right side, and then he would back off, and then he would scream up on my left side,
God.
and then he would back off, and then he would pass me and ride in between us, and then he would back off. And I remember I was coming into a corner to the right, and I was actually not taking the corner correctly because you're supposed to stay a little wider coming around the corner before you cut it in. But I was kind of coming into the corner a little bit hot. Then I was cutting the corner in. And as I was coming in, he pulls up right where I wanted to go. I was just like, oh, my God, what are you doing?
Well,
there?
yeah, just to mention one more thing about him is that Ian and I are extremely safety conscious and aware of safety, and we have a lot of gear and
all the gear all the time
to protect us all the time. Yeah, and but Rick's not like that. He's a wild and crazy guy, and when we're going down the highway, long story. I had as kids, we went to like I mentioned, we went to flat track dirt races all over the western U.S. and like at Ascot in L.A., we'd watch the Harley Davidson flat trackers, and just my whole childhood, I wanted a Harley Sportster. So then when I got older and could afford it, I just went down and bought a brand new Harley Sportster, and that was. God, when was that? I don't even remember anymore. It's like a 2004 or 2006.
Mm-hmm.
A really nice Sportster Roadster, which sits higher for taller guys like me. And then I decided, that I wanted something else. So I thought, my brother and I have completely different lifestyles. Wild and crazy ballroom brawler. Me, Mr. Nerd, doing engineering work and stuff like that. So, wasn't a drinker, partier, none of that stuff. So, Rick was the total opposite. So really I was trying to figure out ways that I could spend time with him, but it was kind of hard to do. I don't want to go drinking. I don't want to go all the things that he does with his buddies, And so finally I thought, I'm going to give him my Sportster with the thought that, hey, we can do rides together.
Mm-hmm.
And how that goes. You can, meet up, talk a little bit, get on the bikes and go and just do some really fun riding and call it a day at the end and, spend a little bit of time with him, And so I did that. And as Ian was just talking about a minute ago, we're when we go down the highway, we're staggered, the way we're supposed to be going down the highway, and Rick is in the back, and like Ian said, 1 minute you hear the roar and he passes you on the left, and the next minute you hear a roar and he passes you on the right, and he zigging and zagging, and you're going, holy, I have no idea where he is. What's he doing? How fast is he going? And then finally, Ian and I just went, okay, we're done.
Yeah.
We cannot do this. This is too dangerous. And so we stopped doing that.
Yep.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think maybe now he's getting a little older, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know. So you kind of started kind of brushing on this a little bit. So, I mean, you guys did go out of high school. You went left, he went right.
Yeah.
You know, so completely different.
Well, he went right in the woods.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's...
Logging.
Right, and rightly so. I mean, that's probably just where his calling was, right? But you started going a little bit of a different direction. So you got a job, I believe, at a tool company at some point, right?
Yeah. Boy, you're going way back there.
Yeah.
Yeah, PNC Tool Company in Milwaukee made really high-quality tools.
Yeah.
And that was just even before your sister was born.
Okay.
And,
so she was born in 70, so we're still talking 60s at this time.
Yeah, and then decided that I needed to go to school. So yeah, I left from there and went down to Corvallis and dinked around down there.
What school's down there?
Oregon State.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people might be listening somewhere other than Oregon who doesn't know.
Yeah.
Corvallis is the home of Oregon State, the Beavers.
By the way, the proud members of the Pac-4.
Right. Yeah.
God, I can't believe that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
But I didn't stay down there very long. We came back up, and I wound up going to work. I got a job at Tektronix.
Well, you got to get back up a little bit, though, because why did you go down to Corvallis? What were you?
To go to school.
Right, for?
Oh, at that time, you could just say, well, geology. I wanted to be a geologist. So that's what I...
Dude, that's a profession that rocks.
Tell that to Itchy Boots. She's heard it a million times.
I'm sure.
But yeah, that didn't work out. So anyhow, I came back, went to work at Tektronix. In my opinion, one of the most amazing companies that ever existed.
Okay.
Making products that normal folks don't know about. We made, basically, just to put it simply, maybe laboratory equipment, oscilloscopes, spectrum analyzers. And eventually, we got into doing printers too. But with many different products, very sophisticated, high-end products. And then they had all kinds of. They had the biggest education system in the state of Oregon outside of the public systems.
That's cool.
We had buildings that were just classrooms, and it was founded by a couple of local Oregonians, which was really amazing, privately held company. And eventually it got up, I don't know, one point, like 24,000 employees. But along with that, they had fantastic benefits for people that wanted to go. They'd pay for your schooling, no questions asked. It was awesome. Of course, we had our own schooling on campus. And what eventually worked out over the years and over the time that we even had Oregon State coming up to our buildings and doing a couple classes a week. And people could get Oregon State degrees right there in Beaverton.
Yeah.
And which was really fantastic. As a matter of fact, I went through all that process, and I wound up actually teaching two classes for Oregon State students, and then another class for just one class for some of the mechanical engineering professors down there on a very it was on computer-aided design and how to use computers to design solid models. But all of that became possible to me just because the company was so sensational. I always like to, I'm boring your you're boring your friends with this work stuff.
Oh, I doubt it. I think people are fascinated.
The cool thing about it was, like today, we hear about these super progressive, forward-thinking companies like Google and Apple and anybody, pick them, whatever you want. And people go, God, do you know that at Google, you have to take certain number of hours a week just to think and try to come up with ideas and thoughts about what could be a really great thing to do in the world and with products and all this kind of stuff. And, oh, God, there's no time clocks. There's none of that kind of stuff. And you just come and go when you want. Can you believe that? And on and on and on. And I go, well, yeah, let's see. Like 40 years ago, we were doing the same thing at Tektronix. We had, I think it was 7 cafeterias on campus that by the way, the campus I refer to, it looked like a college campus, a bunch of brick buildings, really nice brick buildings, beautiful grounds. And we would go to the cafeteria for lunch and dish up ourselves as much as we wanted. And then at the end of the line, there was a place you could throw some money in. And it was just coffee in the mornings and music playing on the speakers. Everybody was free to be creative and do whatever they wanted. And, well, do whatever they wanted. There was, time to brainstorm and do stuff and then come up with creative ideas for the company. And I just chuckle to myself when I see the people talking about these crazy new companies and how forward-thinking they are and how progressive they are. And I was like, oh, that's really old news, guys.
Right, yeah. Well, you guys are pretty groundbreaking. Like you were talking about the oscilloscopes. I mean, in the ham radio world, those are used all the time. And Tektronix is the industry standard.
Well, anything electronics, you have to have an oscilloscope.
Yeah. To
work on it, to build it, to design it. Yeah, I mean, for a long time, that's how the company got started. Back in the old days, an oscilloscope was, like all the other electronic stuff, but an oscilloscope was as big as half a room or whatever you want to call it. And then Howard Vollum and other folks from Tektronix came up with an oscilloscope the size of, a small ice cooler, maybe you could call it. And they walked into the government with this thing, and they were just blown away and said, oh, you got to be kidding me. So the company took off like crazy. And so, yeah, I spent 38 years there and wound up, and it was another gift for me as I got to travel all over the world for the company. And, yeah, I spent 3 years working in a robotics research lab with the company. And I used to sit in there and shake my head. They're actually paying me to do this. It was like, God.
So you really enjoyed that then. So what were you guys doing? Because I remember at one point you brought home like a little robotic arm.
Yeah.
Like in a briefcase or something. So.
Well, what we were looking at was how to introduce robotics into manufacturing.
Okay.
And because that was a big deal at the time. So
now that's like everybody's doing that.
Oh, you have to do it. You're dead. So we had a lab. I mean, even a glass enclosed lab, which I thought was kind of goofy. So we had a $250,000 robot in there, and so we were just learning about it, how to I was a mechanical guy, so I was doing the tactile feedback in the hands and stuff like that you could pick stuff up and assemble stuff. And then the software nerds, program it and stuff like that. And I got to work in there, and it was just fantastic.
Ding.
And you've heard this story before. I think one of my I thought was one of the most successful things we did with the robot was we had 1 foot square carpeting in the room, in the lab, that were not stuck to, they were just lying on the ground. They weren't stuck to the ground with glue or anything. So one day we had a they hired a manager who was a robotics expert from back east. And back east, white shirts, ties, everything's super formal. Everything's under lock and key. And her name was Deborah Earl. She comes out here. We're in the Northwest. People are wearing shorts and sandals and coming and going whenever they want. And she's like, wait, well, what is all this stuff? So she required us to keep the lab locked all the time. And so there's people outside in these buildings working and walking around their desks and stuff, looking in this glass enclosed room. Like, what are those guys doing in there, you know? So, and I really hated that locking the door thing. So one day she's off doing whatever hot shots do. And so I took the robot. I made an angled track out of foam core board, really long, with a little groove about the width of an Oreo. And I put Oreos in it so they would roll down to the robot table, and they would sit there, and then program the robot I put a sensor tape underneath the carpeting, underneath those squares. I just picked those squares up and put the sensor tape in there. Told the robot, as soon as you pick up a signal, go over and grab an Oreo, turn around and hand it out to the person. And then I had the tactile feedback program that as soon as you felt someone touch, it would let go and move back. And so open the door, put a sign out there, come on in, get a cookie. People would start like, what are you talking about? And they would kind of slowly step in the room a little bit, and they were looking around, and I just kind of ignore them. But they had to go far enough to when they stepped on the carpet, and it triggered the robot. And so they're standing there, and all of a sudden they would jump, and it would move, and it would go over and pick up an Oreo, turn around, come over and hand it to them. And they were afraid to touch it and everything, and they would touch it. And after a while, there were lines of people down the hall. I had to go to the store and buy a whole bunch more cookies. And from that day on, previously we're in this ridiculously locked room.
Right.
And people were always, we're in the Northwesterners. We want to be friendly. We want to talk to people. We don't want to be on the other side of the glass from them,
Right.
And from that point on, everybody was saying hi and coming to talk to us. It was awesome.
Oh, that's so good. So you brought everybody together with Oreos. And I think that was a scientific measurement that you just said, because you said it was about the width of an Oreo. So is that, when you guys are in a robotics lab, you're like, it's 2 Oreos wide, man.
Yeah. That was really fun.
Yeah. And that sounded like a pretty cool project.
Because I always felt really bad. Just all those people curious and not even being able to talk to us or anything. That's not the way we are. So anyhow, I worked, and then we don't need to talk about Tektronix forever, but I finished up my career in what we call the Central Engineering Organization, where they had a bunch of mechanical engineers, and then each division and their different products, when they needed some design work, they had this whole central team to work with. And so that's where I finished up at.
Well, that's pretty cool. And before we get too far away from that, so the Oreo shenanigan project, I guess we can call it, what did the boss say? Was she all kind of been out of shape about it, or was she just
she was gone. She didn't last very long anyhow, because she, like I said, she did not fit into the culture of the Northwest and our company being a free and easy and wide open company.
Sure.
And she didn't fit in. And she told me, in fact, well, we don't need to talk about her.
He starts it.
She didn't last long. Let's just put it that way.
Right. Well, I get that. So after, through Tektronix, I guess, I mean, there's 38 years of tech while you're there, while there's other life going on, right? So, let's see, like, you did mountain climbing, hiking, traveling.
You would mention that, wouldn't you?
I mean, there's so much. It's like people started talking about, like, oh my gosh, you got to do an episode with your dad. I'm thinking to myself, one? because there's so much about you that's interesting, because and that's really one of the things I started this about is like, I think motorcycles is what brings this community together, right? But everybody individually has an interesting story, and the interesting people are the ones I want to talk to. So even if you weren't my dad and I knew you within this riding community, I would be very interested in learning about, you're still getting after it and you're still in really good shape at 74 years old,
I don't know about that, but.
Well, you look at most of everybody else at your age, right? So there's a lot of people that are just downhill and they're just not moving and whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But, so you've spent a lot of your time being active. I mean, I remember as a kid, you were running all the time. You were doing mountain climbing. I mean, we said something the other day, we were talking about Mount Hood or something, and I think I asked something on hey, how many times have you been on top of that thing anyways? And you're like, I don't know, like 100,
Yeah.
And it was such an easy, easy
yeah,
number
I guess
to throw out.
we could step back in that. I mentioned earlier that in high school, I was too busy working on cars and motorcycles. That's what I loved to do. I participated zero in any high school activities.
Right. And there's a particular story we're going to have to get into at some point.
Oh, okay. Whatever that is.
You'll know.
But then out of high school, I met my really good friend Mel DiSerrano, and he and I started playing basketball. So in those days, you could get a elementary, junior high gym in the evenings and play. And I fell in love with basketball and just played every minute I could. And a lot of you remember I'd take you to the sidelines in your diapers while we were playing. You were out there watching.
Yeah, that was just last week.
Yeah. And then when you got old enough, we'd let you come out there and play with us a little bit. And then you got older and older till you started kicking our butts. We didn't like that, so.
So I was never asked back.
So yeah, I was playing basketball, and of course I used to ride my bike to work every day to stay in good shape. I'd run at work. And then the mountain climbing thing happened, and I have to mention my dear climbing buddy Don.
Denali Don.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no. You're not supposed to have that.
I thought I turned it off. So anyhow, started getting into climbing. Well, of course, I was actually climbing before Don. Before I met Don, that when he and I hooked up, then that was when we got serious about climbing. But, living under the shadows of Mount Hood my whole life, it's like, you cannot be up there, so I started going up there a lot. I remember even sometimes I'd climb it 3 times a week.
Which, if you don't know, that's crazy. Like, hey, I'm going to go climb Mount Hood 3 times this week.
Yeah, and I started to have lots of friends and people that wanted to go climb Mount Hood. And they thought, would you take me, And one of my favorite stories about that is Pete Rossback, one of my coworkers, was super athlete, long-distance runner.
Yeah. And
super fit, look skinny as a bone, just like, long-distance runners are. And, out doing his marathons and all that kind of stuff. We went up Mount Hood, and he said that was the hardest thing he's ever done in his life.
No kidding.
Because it's a matter of pretty strenuous exercise continuously,
right,
all day. And and then another guy, one of guys I took up in the park. We just were doing the south side from Timberline Lodge up. And he's got out of the car and he's looking up at the mountain and he's going, "That's it right there. That's no big deal." And this is the truth. The last 200 yards he crawled on his hands and knees.
Oh my gosh.
Because he just couldn't even stand up anymore. He was so tired. Anyhow, yeah, so I was mountain climbing, then doing a lot of hiking, backpacking, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then so Don and I got serious about things, and we were training super hard, carrying big packs full of water bottles, gallon water jugs up to the top of Dog Mountain,
which is in the Columbia Gorge, which is a pretty good steep hike.
Yeah, almost 4,000 feet, I guess. Climb.
Well, it's 4,000. What is it? 4,000 vertical feet, but it's in a short amount of time, so it's pretty steep.
Yeah, and then we do Angel's Rest because it's the most westernly hike in the gorge that had any altitude gain to speak of. Mm-hmm. We were doing that with. There was a time we were doing it every night after work. Again, we're carrying water bottles and stuff to the top, and this is what makes me wonder nowadays. As I did it recently, in those days we would go 40 minutes carrying heavy packs to the top. And then recently, no pack to the top in an hour and 20 minutes, or
wow!
Oh my God, have we slowed down? But anyhow, yeah, mountain climb. We started, doing trips. Like Denali, and of course, I've climbed everything in the Cascades from, Shuckson and Baker on the Canadian border. I hate to say it, but I don't like setting foot in California. But I did go to Shasta, and we climbed Castleville Ridge, not the normal way up. And so we climbed all those bunches of times, all the Cascades, and then then we went. Well, you and I went to Pico de Orizaba in Mexico.
Yeah, which is
it's almost it's over 18,000 feet, the tallest mountain in the continental part of the Americas.
Yeah,
and that was really fun too.
Yeah, that was a good time. And that I remember going up. We were in those old army trucks, and they were taking us up to base camp, and we hit that hole or something, and almost tipped over.
Yeah, the old power wagons. They're awesome.
And we flying over to the other side.
One of my favorite memories about that is we wound up going to this little tiny Mexican remote village.
Tlaquechuca.
Yep. And Ian at the time was a rock star, so he had a long goatee. I think was it purple?
It was purple. It was at the time.
And then what was your hair? It was
bleach blonde with the purple in it, yeah.
It was kind of windy, and so the wind would blow his goatee off at a 90-degree angle. But I remember the little kids in the village poking their head around the buildings looking at Ian and pointing at him like they'd never seen anything like that before.
Look at that gringo. Yep.
So, yeah, we did that, and then I met my climbing partner, Lloyd, and we... went down to Aconcagua. In fact, I wound up going to Aconcagua. That's down in South America.
Down in Argentina, right?
Yeah, we went down there. I went down there 3 times and putzing around Patagonia and stuff. And so, yeah, a lot of outdoor stuff. The reason that Don didn't join me on South America stuff is that he had some serious trouble with his breathing and esophagus and stuff. He came within an inch of dying up there on Denali.
I think we should probably get into that a little bit, because hearing, if anybody knows anything about Denali, was it Windy Corner?
Yep.
Right, which is technically one of the most dangerous parts of the climb.
Yeah, it's this vortex. The way the wind currents are and the shape and contours of the mountain, that there's this place called Windy Corner that is infamous for just having howling wind streaming through there. And we'd spent, I don't know, I think about a week working our way up there. And Dawn, it was 10 p.m. It's not dark, because you're so far north. It's 10 p.m. and Don's on the head of the rope, and he collapses in the trail. Oh my God! I was freaking out. I got up to him, and he was as white. His face was as white as the snow, and he couldn't breathe. He couldn't inhale. He couldn't suck in air, and it was horrible. I thought he was dying.
Well, he was.
Well, he was, yeah. So here's where a lot of luck comes into play, or just fate. If it's not your time, it's not your time. So The only thing there's up the trail another 1,000-foot elevation or something, and there's the high camp, or where the National Park Service has a tent with medical support and stuff.
So 1,000 feet, you still have to go vertical 1,000 feet, and if you're not familiar with
I was going at an angle.
Right, so you go at an angle, but that's still, if you're unfamiliar with mountain climbing, you're at altitude, and you have to go 1,000 feet. That's a massive effort.
Yeah, it is. So the only thing that I was freaked out, I thought he was dying, so I took off to get medical.
Right, so you're not roped in at this point.
Yeah, and so here it is in the middle of the night by that point, and
You got crampons on?
Oh, hell yes. I'm all geared up, and no rope, though, because I was by myself, and I crossing snow bridges and all this stuff over these huge crevasses, and I'm going, holy shit, if I fell, nobody even know where I was. Anyhow, I didn't make it up there, and the physical exertion that it takes to do that normally is one thing, but when you're going the absolute fastest you can push yourself to the limits because you think your friend's dying, I got up there and literally collapsed at the door and told them, what the deal was. So two of the guys grabbed their stuff and took off immediately down, while the rest of the team grabbed some more of their medical equipment, and then they told me, okay, tie into the rope, and I'm like, and these guys had been rested, acclimated. They were living at that altitude, and took off running down the mountain. And I'm literally dying, gasping for breath, and exhausted, and it was horrible. But so we get down there, and they have a pulse oximeter, which measures your blood oxygen level. And so the guy puts it on Don's finger, and we're supposed to be upper 90s, mid upper 90s, and he puts it on Don's finger, and he looks at it, and he goes, oh well, that's not right. And he takes off and he puts it on again, and he goes, oh geez, that's not right. So he puts it on his finger, and he goes, oh F, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He said, oh God, he said, because it was working. It's just that Don's oxygen level was so low. So a couple things come into play about fate and luck and all that. So we're in Windy Corner. Infamously nasty place to be. Not a breath of wind. Totally calm, still, amazing. And Don's still alive. That's amazing. And so then they had me go down and help clear a pad for the chopper. So the helicopter, the high altitude helicopter up there is called the Denali Llama, and a jet powered little tiny helicopter. So that very day while we were climbing, Dr. Peter Hackett landed down at base camp with the Nova TV crew. And Dr. Hackett is the world's most renowned expert on high altitude effects and on the human body. And so Don's got the totally calm wind. He's got the helicopter that can land because there is no wind. He's got the world's best doctor right down at base camp with the Nova TV crew down there. And everything just kind of lined up, and so we got him in the chopper. He, they fly away and take him down there. So if you ever watch a Nova episode about the study on the effects of high altitude on the human body, he was the very first person in that film because they were loading him off the helicopter into the tent. So anyhow, took him to Anchorage, and he survived. He was fine. The doctor said he was within an hour of dying, even with the good weather and the ability to get him.
Yeah.
So if we had bad weather, and of course, you're talking 30 below zero and stuff too, he's lucky to be alive.
Yeah.
So so that kind of ended his career with he and I doing anything serious like that.
Right. And that's where you got the name Denali Don.
Denali Don, yeah. So that was kind of scary. It was really scary. When they took him away, I didn't know if he was going to survive or not. So I didn't know for 2 or 3 days. 2 days?
Right.
2 days before I even knew if he survived.
Oh, I didn't know that part of it.
Yeah,
So you had 2 days of wondering if Don's alive or not.
Yeah, and then also dragging in sleds. You have a big backpack, and then you have another 80 pounds of gear in your sled, and so I'm dragging my stuff and Don's stuff.
Oh,
so
man.
It's like, oh my God.
Did you have it all in one sled or two?
In one.
All a set of doubles?
Yeah. So thank God he survived. But
yeah, no kid. I didn't know that part of it. I didn't know you were collapsing by the time you got up there to the tent.
Oh,
I didn't know any of that.
I mean, I had to push myself to the absolute limit. I guess it's.
Yeah. Well, that's.
Yeah, that fate is a weird thing. This isn't motorcycle related, but another.
It doesn't need to be.
Another lesson that I learned about fate that always really struck me was we had climbed Mount Rainier, and we came back down to Camp Muir, and so we were tired. But then there was a single ranger there at Camp Muir. He said, "Hey, we got somebody. Let's say maybe Camp Muir, if you're looking at a clock, would be like, let's say maybe 7 o'clock on the clock dial. Well, it depends. If you go north, yeah. So let's say 5, 6 o'clock is Camp Muir, with the 12 o'clock being north. He comes over and he goes, God, I got a guy that he's in trouble over on around the other side of the mountain. And you guys kind of look like you know what you're doing. Can you help him go get this guy? Sure, okay. But we had to cross the Nisqually Glacier in a place where you don't cross the Nisqually Glacier, because it's a maze of snow blocks that are all broken in crevasses and everything, and you have to work your way through it. And I went, oh, okay. So he ties in. He actually tied in with another rope of ours, and then I was leading with our rope team, and we got out to the. It was scary. It was so dangerous. And finally I saw I was very uncomfortable with what he was doing. So I stopped and I said, okay. His name was Steve Winslow. I said, hey, Steve, you're going to tie in with our rope back here. Mm-hmm. And so I just, So long story. We make it around the mountain.
Oh, not a long story. But so what you were saying is the Steve Winslow was the guy that was leading you guys through there.
He's the National Park Ranger.
Okay. And you didn't like the way he was doing that.
Yes. Plus he was on a shorter rope.
Right.
And those crevasses, I'm not exaggerating, you put a building in them.
Yeah.
And if he fell in there in that little short rope, you need a longer rope with more bodies to stop the fall. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, we made it around.
Before that, if you're listening to this, the reason why the long rope is and the more bodies on there is because if you're walking through a glacier and you're walking around a crevasse, or there's a crevasse underneath that you don't see and you fall through, the other guys on the rope team essentially fall to the ground in what's called a self-arrest. So they take their ice axe, which you would probably see. It's this long pole, and on the top it's got a couple, an adze in and
an adze and a pick.
Yeah, an adze and a pick. So you want to hold the adze in, which is like a triangle, and you want to thrust that pick into the ground or into the ice. And so as the rope starts pulling you, everybody's in self-arrest with the pick in there, and that stops the rope. And then you're allowed to do a rescue at that point to get the guy up with Z-pulleys and things like that. So that's why PODcakes is talking about the short rope making him uncomfortable, because if you go down and you only have one guy on that rope team, chances are that second guy is not going to stop in time, and both guys fall into the crack.
Exactly.
So...
yeah, a quick side note, Ian saved me on a fall with the rope once. Anyhow,
inquiring minds want to know about that one.
So there's as I mentioned about fate and stuff. So we get around, we're exhausted. We'd already climbed the mountain, came down, worked our way all the way around the mountain, got to what they call that, just Fuhr's finger route, which is one of the more difficult ones. And we climbed up to him to get where he was.
So you had to go around the mountain and then up.
Yeah, but not too far. We were already way high on the mountain.
Right.
But when we got to him, we probably had to go up 600-700 feet maybe, vertical, but up through this chute.
Okay.
So we get over there, and we're climbing up the chute to get to him. And then I remember distinctly stopping and resting because, like I said, we're tired. So we're resting and just, trying to get going. So eventually we get up to him, and I was carrying this hard plastic stretcher that rolls up, into this tube, and you roll it out, and it's real stiff. So we get next to the guy. He's lying on a ledge, a stone ledge, and he'd been there for 24 hours.
What happened to get him there?
Oh, he was glissading down through the snow and caught his crampon in the snow and broke his ankle.
So, again, people that don't know what glissading is, you sit on your butt, slide, and you're using that same pick part of the ice axe to kind of control your speed,
exactly,
your direction, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So your crampons are the spiky deals that hook to your boot when you're walking through the ice. And if you're glissading and, man, those go, it's like pumping the front brakes on a bicycle. You just grab and boop, you flip right on over.
So he broke his ankle. He's laying there for 24 hours.
Yep.
So I get up next to him. I take the stretcher and roll it out next to him. A couple other guys, we all grab him and we lift him up and move him over a foot or two to the stretcher and set him down.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we did that, as we were doing it, there's a rock fall starting, and little rocks, big rocks coming. I mean, by the way, a little rock can kill you at speed like that.
Right.
If it hits you in the head. So literally, we dive. We just dive for cover. And next to the stretcher, literally a foot or two from him, where he was laying for 24 hours, a big boulder the size of 2 or 3 basketballs, bam, hit right where he was laying and shattered.
Oh, my Lord.
And literally, within seconds of us moving him from a spot he'd been sitting for 24 hours.
Yeah.
And moved him. And so that has struck me. I'll never forget. Like I was going, mentioned we were climbing up and I would stop to rest because I was so tired.
Uh-huh.
What if I had stopped for another 10 seconds?
Right.
That rock would have killed him instantly.
Oh, my Lord. That's crazy.
But another side note to that is I'm thinking, oh, thank God, we're exhausted. It's getting close to dark. We're going to get a ride on one of those big Chinooks. It's going to be super cool. And we're sitting there next to, by the way, we had to lower him down several hundred feet to a place where a whole bunch of stuff was going on there. But all of a sudden we hear this little tick, 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 tick sound of a chopper. Here comes this little tiny bubble glass chopper with the pilot and one seat.
You're thinking of freaking Blackhawks coming.
And we're sitting there and we went, oh no. We could hardly stand up. We were so tired.
Right.
We had to go down the mountain in a totally unfamiliar area. There are no trails, no nothing. It's just, we had to go down into the tree line, and then we had to traverse all the way back around to Paradise Park in the dark and fog.
Oh, jeez.
And
which could have turned into another rescue.
Yeah, so when I saw that little baby chopper, that little gnat coming up, my heart just stopped. It was like,
oh man.
But that's a good lesson about fate, I think, is it wasn't his time, I guess.
Right.
Jeez.
No, that's kind of crazy, actually. So you mentioned it, so we'll have to go there. If you go back to Motorcycles and Pancakes, we did a video here pretty recently on Road 4220, which is a part of the Oregon BDR Section 6. And it's the TBA route, the to be announced route. it was never a part of the official route yet because, I mean, we had the fires and stuff when Nathan was putting all that together. So now that it's open, we ended up doing that section. So from Road 40, if you look at the BDR map, we rode 4220 from Road 46 to Olali Lake. So we did that, and you actually turned around, rightly so, and I guess before we get to that, we can talk about that whole section, because I think in the last year more than anything, and probably the last 6 months more than that, you really started talking about I can't do this anymore. I need to really stay here, or I can't ride like that. Or
I kept hurting myself.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I mean, you had
fallen down and hurting myself.
Yeah, and it's so we hit a section. I mean, what was that? Maybe less than a mile off the highway, off Road 46. Mm-hmm. We hit what looked like was a washout, and they backed the dump truck up and dumped some big gravel or not rock.
I'm not sure they even dumped anything. I think that was the natural rock.
Was it the natural?
Yeah.
So
that hillside with all the erosion and heavy rains, it just all those grapefruit-sized rocks all piled in there together.
Right, because I remember we rode through that. So it was Travis, Explorer Adventure Moto, was with us. The neighbor Dave, another new friend Kevin was with us, and then myself and Pops. So the thing with riding, anybody that has cardos or Cenas or whatever, you're gonna relate to this is. You turn a corner, you lose comms, right? So you're talking to somebody, you turn a corner, and they're not there anymore. So we were riding along, and I got a little bit ahead with the other guys, and we hit the section, and we didn't really slow down, but I took a mental note of it. And we rode up not very far out of the way, and you and I were talking, and then you weren't there anymore. So generally my protocol is I'll either slow way down and let you catch up, or I stop. Mm-hmm. So this is the point where I knew that was back there. I went ahead and stopped. I waved everybody through. And you there? You there? You there? Hello? Hello? You there? Hello? Hello? Right, doing that whole thing. And it got to the point where it was time to turn around. So I was like, okay, we need to turn around and go see what's going on. And you stopped in the middle of that, put your kickstand down, and you were walking up the hill, like our direction.
Yeah, like I said, I was also injured. My right shoulder is hurt from a previous fall. And I'm out in the middle of all these big, loose, super, just piles of big rocks. And I'm halfway through it, and I'm going, I can't do this. I cannot fall down. If I do fall, I got to fall left, because I can't fall on my right shoulder. And then finally, in order to get through that, as everybody knows, that sort of thing, you have to go fast. Well, let's not say fast. You have to be moving at a good pace to get through that stuff.
Yep.
And when you're moving at a good pace, that means you have some speed, which means if you do fall, you're moving at fast speed, and you're going to be hitting all these big rocks.
Right.
And I can't do it. So I just was trying to work my way slowly through it, paddling through it, and which, I could have done. If I kept going. But in the middle of it, I finally just went, wait a minute. Why am I doing this? I shouldn't be doing this with my gimpy shoulder and so on. Plus, I'm getting to the point where, age-wise, that it's like I really got to take it back a few notches, and just not put myself in situations where I can get hurt.
Right. Yeah.
And so at that point, I'm standing there, thinking about all that, and then you came around the corner, and I went, I'm going to go back. So.
Well, at that point too, I thought that was a pretty good conversation, because a lot of times we don't like to separate. Right. But at that point, the road from where we were back to the pavement, it was a good gravel road from that point on.
No problem.
And then I just recently was at Olali Lake and went around that back way, and it's just super hard packed, good gravel road going around.
It was a really enjoyable ride.
Yeah. So I was very comfortable with, okay, I'll see you at Olali Lake.
Yep.
Yeah. So you made the decision. We got the bike, turned around or whatever. And then I remember we talked about this on the last podcast, but we were sitting there and those 3 guys came up and they were doing the BDR. And so I told them, hey, I got my buddies up there. Eventually they're going to stop. Will you just let them know I'm good? PODcakes, turn around. I'm going to be right there. Right. And that guy said, do you want to ride with me? And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. And then they just took off. I was like, I'm still like a long ways from my motorcycle. I have to go over there. I have to get it on. I have to turn it on, and have to, throw the kickstand up and get going, which doesn't take that long. But when you're 20, 30 yards away from your motorcycle and they're just like, okay, and they take off, you're like, all right. But it was really good because Travis, too, on that time, he talked about it. He got into that little area and he was like, I'm turning around, too. So, and he was not a lot more further than, he was probably a half mile, 3/4 mile further than what you did. Yeah. And I came around the corner and I'm shooting this video and I'm like talking, blah, 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 blah. And I come around the corner and, oh, there's Travis. I just thought he was waiting for me, but he was like, nah, man, I'm going to tap out. I'm going to turn around. I'm going to go back and stuff. So,
yeah, what's his channel? Adventure
Explorer Moto.
Explorer Moto.
Yeah.
I don't know if people out there saw his cartwheel crash on his Africa train.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That freaked him out.
Yeah, that was a legit crash. We talked about that. Yeah.
And that was scary. He could have got hurt really bad. Thank God that thing cartwheeled in the air and didn't land on him.
Oh, 100%.
But so he was still trying to mentally recover from that.
Well, that, and then he's just recovering from the heat exhaustion, too, down on the BDR that he got.
Well, that was after us at Olali Lake, though, I think. Anyhow, yeah, that...
was it? I don't think so. Maybe?
Yeah, I think it was.
Okay.
So, yeah, you after you get banged up or have a close call, you get a little gun shy for a while.
Oh, absolutely. I've had a couple spills. You've been there for both of the good ones. And, yeah, you do. You kind of get that. And that was one of the things, too, that we talked about is, like, I remember... after breaking the ribs and kind of rolling in, and every once in a while you feel the bike do something weird, and it's not that big of a deal, but you're like, oh, I remember that feeling, and you're back right at that moment again for just a few seconds. But 4220, that road is actually pretty cool because it goes right by Brighton Bush Lake. And we spent a lot of time.
Our old stomping ground.
Right. We spent a lot of time like camping in there. And that would also be the trailhead for the Pacific Crest Trail, the part that we would drive to. And then we would hike south into Jefferson Park right on the foot of Mount Jefferson, which is probably one of my most favorite places in the world.
Yeah, it's pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
It's amazing. I mean... It's a bit of a hike in there, and I mean it's so worth it. But we had these big fires go through there, so us that day going on that road was I was very eager to get up around Brighton Bush and see what the lake looked like, as well as all the way over to Olali. And Brighton Bush Lake, it's like the left side of the road is gone, the right side where the campground is and everything. It's great. Looks normal.
I'm so glad, so happy to hear that.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's clearly the topography has changed a little bit, but, that lake is still there. But that, I have a lot of memories growing up at that lake, but we would hike into Jefferson Park and we climbed, Jeff, right? So that would be kind of the starting point, right, is Jeff Park. So you wake up, like 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, or midnight, or whatever it is, and take off. So you're climbing all night and stuff. And we went up there and had a buddy of mine with us, and we were just climbing that thing. That was it
was fun.
That was a good climb. But, you got to look back. I don't remember how old I was. I was probably, 18, 17, something like that, somewhere in there. And at that point, I was somewhat experienced. I mean, I knew how to do belays and set all that stuff up. I was comfortable on ropes and crampons and ice axes and stuff, been on the top of a few things at that point. And I remember, so to set the scenario up, it was getting a little bit later in the afternoon, and the snow that we went up, it was like kind of a glacier into a chute. Going up to the top of the ridge there. And the snow was not very good. So we're at the top of that, and Dad was like, all right, I'm going to... I can't remember if he went down first or if I went down first. I think I went down first.
Well, you went down first because I was lowering you guys.
Right. So I went down.
With the rope while you guys went down.
Right. So you belayed us down.
Yes.
And then at some point off to the left, if you're going down off to the left, there was kind of the trail through the rock, kind of heading around the backside of the mountain that we needed to go. So we went down there, lowered, and I remember sitting there, and I set up the belay and got you way up top. So a belay is, so he's at the end of the rope, and I'm at the other end. And as he's coming down, I'm moving the slack from my right to my left through a figure eight. So if he ended up falling, I can stop the rope and stop him from essentially falling all the way down to the bottom of the hill. And I remember, it's kind of funny because you think like, oh, this is my dad, he's invincible. Don't even worry about it. This is like a formality, Mr. Mountain Climber here, And I remember I was just moving the rope right to left, going through that figure eight. And I was over here talking to my buddy, and I'm like, okay. And I had this constant like tempo, of just moving the rope. And then all of a sudden I was like, what? Going faster and faster and faster and faster. And I kind of look over my shoulder, and there you go. Going down the bottom of the hill. And I'm like, okay, I'm trying to get you. And then I think it got wrapped around your feet or something, the rope.
Well, yeah. I mean, when I went by, I remember saying, pull the slack as fast as you can, thinking that when I did come to the end of the rope, I wouldn't come to a dead stop, but you would have enough of it taken so it could slow me down a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
but I wound up, when I finally did get to the end of the slack, it swung me around and wedged the rope. I was head first down the hill, and the rope got tangled in my crampon and wedged in between my boot and the crampon.
Oh, geez.
So I had a hell of a time getting the rope out of there so I could get going.
Oh, man.
So this mountain climbing thing, I know one thing that we may have been, I can't guarantee this, you and I may have been the first people to climb St. Helens after the eruption.
Right. Yeah.
And the reason I say that, it was still closed to climbing.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad, as I mentioned previously, is a total BSer, friendly guy, rode his motorcycle to the Forest Service office up there and talking to the guys. And they said, yeah, we're kind of kicking around the idea of maybe letting some people climb up there. And he goes, really? Well, can I have a couple permits for my son? And the guy, okay, yeah, why not? So you and I could have been the first people up there because we were the only people up there.
Right, we were.
When we went.
That was my first mountain.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can't remember. You weren't very old.
I was in the 4th grade.
Probably.
Yeah.
So you chugged along.
Maybe 5th grade.
So then I drug you up Mount Hood
Yep.
Of course, I have to tell my favorite story about that, too, is we're climbing up through the pearly gates, which is this narrow slot near the top, and it's thick ice on all sides, and then we're front pointing our crampons and ice tools going up through this. And I get through the top of the pearly gates, and I got the belay set up, and I'm looking down at Ian, and here's this Ian looking up at me with his helmet and all of his gear, and looking up at me, and I'm looking down with all these ice pillows, snow pillows, and just a fabulous picture. So I take my camera and I look, pointing it down at him, and I take his picture, and I, because I got gloves on, and fumbled the camera and dropped it. And here goes his camera pinging off the ice, falling down. And the thing that I remember so distinctly about it wasn't as if you were down there like this, lining up trying to catch it. You were you were just standing there looking very casually, not moving, and the camera's falling at 1,000,000 miles an hour right at you, and you just put your glove up and boom. Oh, put it in your pocket.
Like, yeah.
So that how old were you? I should know these things. How old when the first time you did Mount Hood? Like 12 or something?
Yeah, probably somewhere in that ballpark. In fact,
and then we did Rainier when you were what, 14 or 13, 14 the first time?
Yeah, the first time. I don't know if it was the first time or one of the others, but I remember you and I summited, and when you get to the top of Rainier, when you get to the summit, you actually drop down a little bit into the crater, and then you got to walk across to the highest point. Mm-hmm. And we did that, and we came back down into that crater a little bit, and there was a big rock. I don't know if I think we were with Don or Dave or both.
Probably.
Or maybe Sid on that trip.
Probably Don and Dave, yeah.
But I remember we went down onto a rock and we took a nap. We just crashed out sleeping against this rock for a little bit on the top of Rainier. I thought that was pretty cool. But I got to tell you, my favorite climbing story. There was one of them. I felt like a cool guy. We had somebody coming down Mount Hood. Both of these are on Mount Hood, but somebody was coming down the chute right at the summit of Mount Hood, and I remember he was coming down on his back, and you were all freaked out, like, "What are you doing, dude? You're gonna fall." So you belayed him down, and then you just told me, like,
"Oh yeah, that's right,"
and you were like, "Well, I'll just see you at the top." So I was 16 at that time, and I went solo up that chute, and I remember getting to the top and looking like a young 16-year-old with a mullet. But I came around that corner, and I remember the people's faces at the top looking at me like, where's your parents? That kind of look coming around at the summit of Mount Hood.
And where's her rope?
Yeah. No rope, and how old are you? It's like, I got this. Don't worry about it.
You were a veteran at that time.
But my favorite one is we were doing the Y East route, and then the wind with the tent.
Oh, God.
So it set this up. It's getting kind of crappy out at this point, right? So it's super windy. The weather's kind of coming in, and we already knew we were going to camp out at night. We were going to go up onto the hill here, and we were just going to camp out. And we're setting up the tent, and I remember you were trying to put the poles in, and I'm holding the tent for dear life. And the wind's coming through. And you're like,
howling.
Don't let go. Don't let go. And I'm like, I won't. And I'm just holding this tent, and this big wind gust comes up and just rips the tent out of my hands. And it just like slow motion. It just went, and I took this now fully made tent 100 feet in the air and just started going down the White River Canyon. And you're like, grab your pack. We're running after this tent. We went way down.
Oh, yeah. We had to go way down the canyon.
Way down. And then it was like, well, we're going to go back out there. That was funny. I just remember holding on to that thing and just being like, oh, I'm so in trouble. Watching that thing go up.
No, I don't think people realize that it's like a sail, when there's a huge gust of wind or it's going to rip it out of your hands.
That was a lot of fun.
Just one, and we'll get back to motorcycling, but there's one thing that I want to comment on about our Cascades and Mount Hood in particular. I've been around the world a bit, climbing here and there, and of course, places like Denali where it's just unbelievably cold, and you sit down in Portland, say it's January in Portland, and it's a nice sunny day, and you're looking up at Mount Hood, and you don't realize what's going on up there. That as you go up in altitude, the temperature drops really fast, and many times I've been up there, far below zero, and but we're also very close to the coast. And long story short, the weather, I think, in my travels around the world, the worst weather I have ever experienced and the coldest I have ever been is Mount Hood.
Really?
Wow. People don't they look up there and from their living room window or whatever, and they don't realize it's cold up there and it's windy up there.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I spent that one night at Illumination Saddle, and the wind was howling through there, and it was cold. And I think that's like, people don't. I think if anybody was coming out to the Northwest, I want them to respect the mountains. And
Oh yeah.
number of years ago, those three guys that decided to come and climb Mount Hood
Yeah.
from back wherever they were, back east
I
somewhere.
think they were from New York.
And they got here, and it's our vacation time. We've only got a couple of days. Let's just go ahead and do it. Well, it cost them their lives.
Right.
You get up on Mount Hood in a storm. You don't have any idea what it's like until you've been up there in a storm. It's scary. And, of course, as we all know, living around here, all those poor kids from the Episcopal school that some bozo took them up there in that, ill-equipped and stuff in the terrible storm. And
Yep.
they all died. It was like, oh, my God.
Yeah, it's been that's some pretty brutal stuff up there for sure. I've not experienced that stuff with you, but it's definitely can get,
Well,
pretty wild.
I've had the feeling before that when you were a kid, that we were up climbing something, and you kind of had that look on your face like, this guy's trying to kill me. What am I doing?
Maybe.
What am I doing up here?
I don't know. I always enjoyed the mountains. I know we got hit by a storm up on Mount Baker once, and I remember I think I had a cassette tape with one cassette, and it was Metallica's Master of Puppets, and I listened to it over and over and over, and I think I slept for like 18 hours waiting for that storm. And like when I finally woke up, like all of you guys were like, "Oh, he's awake! Welcome back!" I was like, "Yeah, I'm a teenager. What do you want from me?"
Well, anyhow, we were talking about motorcycles, weren't we?
Well, I don't know. At some point, I'm actually kind of sticking with the mountain stuff because I know this is motorcycles and PODcakes, but you were talking about South America and going down to Aconcagua, and I seem to remember one time you talked about some dudes with guns in the woods, or some of the army guys or something stopped you, and then was that the same time you went down to Patagonia?
Actually, that was a previous trip. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But, that's really always unnerving. But the Argentines actually send their military up there for training.
Oh, okay.
I think it's a special mountain group or something.
Sure.
And they actually, I wasn't actually at this one. My climbing partner, Lloyd Bookie, was there. He ran upon these guys that were dying. They were in serious trouble. And I don't know, people don't know, but when you have severe hypothermia, you lose your mental faculties. There have been many people have been found, like in the Three Sisters Wilderness years ago, where a girl was found dead from exposure, but all of her warm clothes and stuff were in her pack. Gloves, hats, parkas were all in her pack, and she was in her, she got cold and lost her faculty. Anyhow, these guys were in serious trouble, and my buddy Lloyd, they didn't even have their gloves on, and it's really cold. And so Lloyd took off his pack and gloves and got into their stuff and got their gloves for him, got them on. He literally got frostbite doing that,
yeah.
helping them get their gloves. But yeah, that was quite a story. Of course, that's actually the biggest mountain
Denali's the biggest, right?
Actually, the tallest mountain in the world is Chimborazo in the Andes. And the reason for that is it depends on where you measure from. If you want to measure from the center of the earth to the top of the mountain, that's the tallest mountain in the world, right? But the problem is the earth is not round. At the equator...
You're not going to tell me it's flat, are you?
Oh, yeah, and it's only 5,000 years old, too.
Yeah.
But at the equator, the Earth is actually 5 miles. The diameter is 5 miles wider than if you went from pole to pole.
Right.
Because of the rotation and,
Right.
So that makes Chimborazo the tallest mountain in the world. But Chimborazo, it is a super popular mountain to climb. But Aconcagua is kind of the big boy in the Andes, so everybody wants to do that. So it's a pretty cool place Plus, the cultural thing is, at least, I mean, it's been a million years since I've been down there. Like 20 years ago or something. And the cultural thing was really cool. And, aside from, like, we're going to leave McDonald's at a certain amount of time, climb out and be back, the same day. Or down there, you have to, you got to travel. You got to go back into the boonies. You got to hike for, 3 or 4 days to get to the base of the mountain, whatever. And it was just a wonderful experience. Pretty cool place.
That sounds pretty cool for sure. And then one time something happened. You guys ended up down in Patagonia.
Yeah, that was pulmonary edema is nothing to mess with,
right?
And it's such a common thing. And so Paul, our friend Paul, was in the tent next to me at the at base camp at the foot. It's like 16,000 feet or so, and he's sleeping in middle of the night. I could hear his lungs gurgling and crackling.
Oh, Jesus.
When he's breathing. I went, oh, Jesus. Pulmonary edema.
Yeah.
And, man, I rustled him up out of there, and we took off because the only thing you can do with that is to go down. So we went down and made it out, and then we had time to kill, so we went down to Patagonia, which was really awesome.
I was going to say, that's kind of a lot of people's bucket list to make it down there.
Yeah, what was really cool about that, too, is we left from Santiago, Chile, on the Pacific coast of South America, and then we were going down to Punta Arenas, way down on the tip.
Mm-hmm.
And so the plane, it was I think it was a 707 or a smaller jet, but it would stop at 2 or 3 towns on the way down, and it was so cool. I mean, there are volcanoes and mountains everywhere, and spectacular lakes and rushing waterfalls. And
wow.
Here's a town like Bend.
Right.
Well, not that big, but smaller, but sitting in amongst, because when you're approaching to land or takeoff, you're right down there,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at all this stuff going, oh, my God, this is spectacular. And we got to see those places just landing. But then when we got down at the tip, then we got on a bus and started heading north through, some of the, national parks, Las Glacias and Torres del Paine and all those sorts of places, or, Shalatland and the Fitzroys and all that stuff.
Man.
Like, oh, my God.
That's a trip right there. So,
yeah, if you like wind, it's super windy.
A little windy down there, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like you like going to windy places.
Well, it's this little strip of land, the little point of South America. On either side, there's literally tens of thousands of miles of open ocean.
Right.
And nothing to block the wind. So the wind can just come back and forth,
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So you get back, I don't know. I'd like to dive into Patagonia a little bit too, but there's a lot of other stuff.
Nah.
I just don't know where to go. So, okay, so we come back up here. So you start doing this little motorcycle thing. I remember as a kid, a brown Honda on the road. You would ride to work or whatever. I remember you picking me up. I don't know if it was brown. That's just what I remember.
Trying to remember which one.
Maybe it was a Kawasaki.
Oh, heavens, no.
Anyways, I remember we were cruising around doing like, I was still pretty young, and I remember we'd kind of take off and go to different places and then you'd just pull over and be like, all right, your turn. So I'd be cruising around and, riding on the roads at like, oh, Jesus, maybe 12. 13 maybe.
Oh, God, that's old. You should have had a lot more experience by then.
Well, I did driving. A lot of driving by then, for sure, on the back roads. But I think on the motorcycle, so my sister's name's Christina. And when I was a kid, I couldn't say Christina. I would just say nah. So, nah. So I remember nah had a bike, and then I had a bike. And then we would go out in the woods, and you would follow us in the truck in the old Silver Ranger and go around. You remember that time we were unloading the bikes, and that dude was shooting the gun, and it, like, ricocheted above our heads? I remember that. It was like, boom, it went off, and you're like, hey, there's people over here. Yelled at that.
Great. Like, I noticed today those guys we saw shooting in that quarry, and the road we were on looped around the quarry right alongside where they're shooting.
So fun fact, I saw that, and I waved to him, and when I waved to him, I was looking at my map, and I saw that we were going to loop around, but I caught enough of where they were putting the rounds into, where I was like, yeah, we're fine. And there was just this huge, like, wall of rock that they were shooting at, and I was like, yeah, we're fine. But yeah, that happens. I'm not one. This isn't anything we want to get off on, but when I go out and shoot, I do not go in the woods. I am responsible for the time that finger hits the trigger and it puts that round out of the end of the rifle or the handgun or whatever we're shooting. I'm responsible for that round until it falls to the ground and has no more momentum. And I'm just like, man, ricochets, I don't know who's walking back there. I don't know what's walking back there. I don't want to deal with it.
Well, plus you pick up your...
Well, yeah, I pick up my brass.
Your brass.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't. And that drives me crazy. And then also... that's just a whole other topic. I don't like when you go out there, and a lot of times you get out in the woods and hand in hand, people are shooting, but they also got, their bush light cracked open. And that's just, I don't want to be anywhere around you guys. But
Speaking of Kawasaki's.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody I know wanted to get
a crotch rocket.
Couldn't live without it. Got to have a crotch rocket. Got himself a little ninja, right?
Yeah.
And then...
Who are we talking about? I don't remember who this was. No, you know what? This was actually talked about too. Man, I was 19-ish? Somewhere in there. So yeah, I went off and I went to a Motorsports of Hillsboro and bought me a CX6, I think it was. Well, it was the 600 Ninja crotch rocket, purple, blue, gray. It was rad. It was very 90s. And went out and got that thing. And admittedly, I bought a bike that was way above my riding level at that time. Like, you can ride off-road or whatever, but when you're on a crotch rocket in traffic, it's a different beast, right? So we all know there's a little bit of difference. And I think truck driving through the years has made me a way better rider just because of being observant, and my eyes and my mind are just completely trained differently. So I was not that at 19. I was an invincible guy. I wasn't all the gear all the time. I was wearing all, like tennis shoes, maybe boots, but like just jeans and maybe a long sleeve, most likely a t-shirt, a crappy helmet. I remember that.
Cheap helmet.
Yeah, it was full face and everything, but it was cheap. And it was just, the guy at the store was like, oh, it's good enough. Oh, okay. So I remember we were coming home and we got into a situation, a heavy braking situation, somebody getting in front of me. And, man, no ABS, no nothing. And, man, I went over on that thing. And I remember at the time, too, I know I've talked about this before with Travis, but I remember at the time I had a high school job. I was working at the ice rink at Clackamas Town Center, right? So I was a skate guard. So I was that guy that was skating around and be like, hey, man, get off the wall. Hey, kids, slow down. No, none of that, okay? That was my job. And then I drove the Zamboni. Fun fact. I drove the Zamboni for a while, so yeah.
That was cool.
That's right. Not many people can say that. Maybe that should be the next part, motorcycles and Zambonis. But I remember hitting the brake and then the rear end coming up off the ground, and then actually, because I was swerving to the right to avoid this car, and so I'm heavy on the front brake, and remind you, no training at all like what we do now, right? There's nothing So I'm heavy on the brake. The back end comes up. It starts going to the left and it almost comes perpendicular to the lane. And then the rear tire hits the ground. And then obviously right then, poof, the bike going crazy. I remember being in the air and then being in the air thinking like, oh, right. So here's my job at the ice rink and I'm hanging out with all these like figure skaters and stuff. Right. And I just remember literally tuck in the air, like the figure skaters do, just tuck your arms in and everything. And I remember hitting the ground tucked and rolling 2, 3, 4 times, however many it was. But I rolled across the median into the oncoming lane of the traffic. And I remember rolling and having my eyes open at some point and seeing cars coming at me.
Oh, God.
And so like that next roll, I rolled onto my feet and stood up and got out of the way. Moved back into the median of the road because we're at a 4-lane highway. And I was so jacked of adrenaline, I didn't undo my D-ring on the helmet. I just lifted and forced the helmet off my head. So the worst thing of that I actually had was a scrape up of like by my eye and on my forehead that was actually from me taking my helmet off. Right. So I got that. And the fun fact is it happened like a half a block from a fire station. And it seemed like by the time I was done rolling, the fire trucks were there. They just heard an accident. They're like, oh, here we go again. So they all got after and got out there. But the weird thing is, Casey was going to ride with me. Right. So she was like, oh, I'm going to ride with you and blah, blah, blah. And at the last second, I don't really remember what, but I was like, nah, don't. Right. And so at the time, I remember she was wearing like some really like short shorts and then like a tank top because it's summertime. So I'm thinking to myself, dude, that would have been horrible, because she would have been in short shorts and a tank top because that's what she was wearing. Right. So anyways, yeah, that was a fun fact. So yeah, going back to the Kawasaki, that thing rolled and disintegrated. So
yeah, I mean, it was almost brand new.
Yeah, I didn't have it very long.
And it just gave you you just realized that all that plastic was really expensive.
Oh, it was way expensive. Way expensive.
So we wound up not even fixing it for a long time. In fact, I don't think we ever did fix it.
No, we sold it as is.
Yeah,
somebody came and got it. Yeah. That was actually kind of an eye opener. Like even now, I've got Clackamas Community College over here, and it's not uncommon for me just to go over there after a ride or before a ride, or if I'm going out by myself or whatever. Team Oregon, which is our safety program around here. If you're going to get your endorsement, you have to go through their program. I've got a community college not too far from me, and that's one of the places that they hold their training. And there's 2 separate parking lots that are all painted up with a bunch of different drills and things. You don't need your cones out there all the time. You can literally just go up and just follow the dotted lines or the painted lines or the swerves or whatever. And it's always good to go up there. And I remember
Definitely.
And
one thing that I remember back about the Kawasaki incident was I was always really, really proud of you that you said, you know what, that bike's over my head. And until I get older, until I get wiser, until I get some training, I'm not going to ride anymore. So
yeah, that was a why.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah,
because it always just fries me when I hear about a 18-year-old kid walking into never ridden in his life, walks into Yamaha shop and buys an R1.
Right.
And it's like, you just signed the guy's death warrant,
I know. We have, I don't know how far into the names I should go here, but we have a really good family friend. He just bought the Mustang, right? So his son, and there's issues there, and that's what he wants to do. He's never ridden, but his dream is to get a crotch rocket and just for whatever reason, he wants to ride from here to Bend to Salem and back. That's like a loop that he wants to do in a day. And I'm like, I just told him one day he was over here for dinner. We were just having family dinner and we were just hanging out. And I just told him, I go, you don't really want a crotch rocket, especially if you're going to do something like that.
Hell no, he'd be killing himself.
Think about think about Sport Tour. And we started talking about all these different bikes, but man, he is hell bent on getting the crotch rocket. And it's the same thing. I don't know for a fact, but isn't Europe have like, you can't buy one?
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
To get a power, I mean, an R1's like, you could take it down and race MotoGP, and it's
a 200-mile-an-hour bike.
Yeah, it's super fast bike. And from what I understand, that in Europe, if you're just some kid off the street, you can't buy one.
That's brilliant.
You have to go to school and be trained and certified before you can even buy one.
See, I fully accept that too. I do. And my buddy Nick Aaron, my old neighbor, I remember he started getting into motorcycles and he did the same thing. He went out and bought a GSXR. I don't know if it was the big boy or a 750. I think it was a 750, but he started doing track days, and I was like, okay, that's cool. At least you're learning at high speed stuff and you're learning that through the courses. Mm-hmm. But he'll probably get mad at me for saying this, but I was in the garage one day and he was out there kind of going for a ride and I hear that thing wind up, and all of a sudden I hear, clearly he wrecked, right?
Oh, God.
And so Braden, my youngest son, he was young, and he comes running into the garage. He goes, Nick just crashed. Actually, I think he rode his bike into the garage, and so I'm like, oh, man. So I went out and I made the right out of the driveway down the street, and I can see him down at the end of the street. He's fine, because if you remember going out there, you went down about maybe 100 yards, and the road went to the right to go out, right? So there was that yard right there. He was in that yard, right? The bike was all there. The guy was coming out. Nick is like scratching his head or whatever. I went and got his wife, which I probably shouldn't have done. I should have been, all right, dude, guy code at this point. But I went and knocked on the door and said, Nick just crashed. He's fine. He's down here. So she was like, oh, my God. So he claims to this day that his glove got caught on the throttle and he rode a wheelie. And I'm like, no, you rode a wheelie and it just got out from you. And that's what happened. You whiskey throttled a wheelie. Yeah. That's what happened. But he's like, no, man, my glove got caught on the throttle. I'm like, no.
Well, then our motorcycling days kind of went on hold there for a while.
Yep.
And then, then I, like I said, I went and bought a Sportster and then just started moving from there to various motorcycles.
And I would steal those out of your garage every once in a while and hold on to them for a while.
And then you decided you wanted to be the big fat bike cruiser dude with the beanie helmet.
Jesus. Can we not talk about that?
We started getting in, doing some rides then. But this whole adventure bike thing is just because I love camping. I camp so much, backpacking, climbing, that sort of thing, that I just love camping. And God, I just love the adventure riding. I love being like today was just a sensational ride. We went on some fabulous roads. We went down roads that are overgrown with bushes we were plowing through.
Oh, it was so much fun.
All sorts of cool stuff. So
the adventure riding is really a pretty epic thing because I think for us it's been. It has been a lot because you started riding your Harleys and stuff and having those through life, but it's been road dominant for a very long time. And then, we started getting some different bikes and starting to ride on gravel. And I think we were both like, what's down that road? What's down this road? Let's go down here. And then let's ride to these places. And then, the BDRs and all this stuff. And then eventually, you got your Super T, and then, I was riding the FJ like it was a GS, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I would just take that thing wherever. But eventually, we got the AT-AT now, and, the AT-AT is what I call my Africa twin. It's a Star Wars term. It's all-terrain armored transport. So AT-AT. Okay, there you go. So, we got that, and it just opens up an entire new world to be able to do this.
It's so fun.
I mean, you have the big bike versus little bike argument, right? Like, what do you want? What do you want? But I think it doesn't go to. I don't think it's big bike versus little bike argument, because I think they're both right for that person, right? So you got to figure out your riding style. For me, my AT-AT, I ride like a 450 or a 250 because I'll take it on single track trails, and I'll ride with my buddies with the 250s and the 450Ls or whatever, and I keep up with them for the most part, But we get out on the big roads and we ride to Moab from here. We do long trips, and a lot of it is on the road. And it's like nothing better than having that big 1100 just cruising down the road. Like we just did with Critter. We were running down 95, US 95, going down to Winnemucca when we were going to go meet Grace, the Graceful Renegade. And Critter is Critter Moto. A little shout out to my friends. And I remember it was super windy. It was super windy there for a while. But Critter said it best. He was like, he was fighting the wind. He was getting kind of grumpy. It was a lot of physical exertion on his little 250,
He was exhausted.
Yeah, he really was. And we got into Winnemucca, and we were supposed to go like another 50, 60 miles. And he was like, no, I'm done.
Yeah.
But he said, I looked in my mirror, and I'm fighting the wind, and exhausted. And you're back there with your hand off, messing with your helmet, looking around like nothing's going on. Yeah. I was like, well, a lot of fairings too, but it just
I chose to get the Super Tenere because I guess I have a cheapskate streak a little bit, but I could get a very capable bike for at the time, $10,000, $12,000 less than even more than a GS.
Oh man, those are spendy.
But you know what? The Super Tenere gets bad mouthed, but what I think it really is, it's a fabulous motorcycle. I just can't say enough about it. They go forever. They're indestructible. Every time you go to start it, it starts. Guys have got 500,000 miles on them. They're just fantastic. They corner fantastic. And kind of like what it comes down to is are you some hot shot Chris Birch racing rider, or are you just a guy like me that likes to just cruise along?
Right.
And I don't have to be doing single track, going crazy. That bike is sensational. In fact, we took it to Moab, and I had trouble obviously in the sand and stuff with it, but I remember on that one road coming from the top,
Schaefer's Trail.
Schaefer's Trail. I remember some places on that when it was solid rock, like just solid steps, foot or two everywhere, and it's solid, and you just had to go through it. That thing would just cruise through that stuff like nothing.
Yeah.
Better than my T7 does, I think, because of the weight, and I don't know. And that is a sensational motorcycle. I love that thing. But, of course, then I got the T7 because I can't pick up the Super T anymore, because when I fall over, which I do often, it's too heavy for me.
I don't know right offhand, what's the weight difference between the two bikes?
About 140 pounds.
That's massive.
Well, but then as I found out, I can't pick up the T7 either.
Well,
the reason being it's a real narrow bike.
So it lays flat.
And it lays flat, where other bikes I watch these guys picking up, the GSs on how to lift a heavy bike, and the thing's sitting there at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah, with the bags.
Because of the pistons and the bags. Like anybody could pick that up.
Right.
But like the Super T is or the T700 is laying flat.
Right.
So it's like, oh, that thing didn't, even though it's lighter, it's still hard to pick up.
Fun fact, at some point today we were doing some filming, and I was like, oh, stop, I want to get that shot through the trees, right? We were coming through, and I was like, oh, turn our brights on so we can get a little bit more, the ambiance coming through the trees as we're coming around the corner to the camera. So we go by the camera, and I don't know how you did hit that camera. You went right.
It was close.
It was super close. I was like, oh, he's going to hit the camera. He's going to hit the.
I did it.
Almost.
I did it on purpose, too.
Oh, it's going to be epic.
I tried to gas it as I was going by the camera.
I know. You came around a corner earlier today, and I guess I threw rocks on you, but we were going up it wasn't that one. I think it was the other. It was the other shot that we were doing. And you just gassed it. I just saw all these rocks whoosh, all over me. And I'm like, yes, that's awesome. And I actually had the other camera on, so I hope I'm getting that spray of those rocks around the other one. But I told you after we passed that camera, I'm like, I'll just keep going, whatever. I'll catch up to you. So I go up and I turn around and come back and get the camera, break down the tripod and everything. And I'm like thinking about this shot. I'm like, man, this is going to be a cool shot, kind of looking around where we were. And I put everything in there, get the camera stowed away, and I go to turn around again. And I got my head really far around. I'm at full lock, and I'm making a beautiful U-turn. And for whatever reason, I'm like, squirrel moment. I'm like, look at the scenery. So I just looked to the right a little bit, and I'm like, oh, no. And it was just set the bike down. I was going over, just set it down. And then I'm like, son of a bitch. And then, of course, I'm looking around. I was like, did my dad see this? Tried to see where you were at. And I was just like, but luckily, where it went, it was really easy to stand the bike back up. Okay. So I just kind of giggled and moved on with my day. And I didn't tell anybody about that. So it's a secret between us. So nobody else knows about that.
So, yeah, today's I think we could call that ride the Audubon Society ride.
The Audubon Society ride. We might get in trouble if I put that on YouTube under that title, but it needs to be something. But, yeah, like today's ride, this video it's the 6th of October. How far ahead am I? It's the 6th of August, 2023. And this video will probably be out 2 or 3 weeks. I got a few other videos that drop first, but this one's pretty cool. We caught an owl and a hawk, like right in front of my face. Like that owl, when it came out in front of me, I swear to God, I could have just touched it. I mean, it was right there.
Wow.
And I was like, it's an owl, this is awesome. It was totally epic. But so staying on to, we've had a brief conversation about traveling recently. And my wanderlust is like, I need to go. And you're like, been there, done that. I don't want to travel anymore. Okay, so now you got to take that comment and just throw it away, right? So you're fit, you're riding. I ask everybody this, what would be your dream ride? Where would you go for your dream ride? Like, I'm just going here, and I'm going to start from this place, wherever it might be, your house or whatever. And what is that final destination for a dream ride?
Well, it's going to sound kind of boring because it's not anything new, anything different. Everybody's doing it. But I would like to go, first of all, various different backcountry routes up to the Lake Louise area.
Oh, yeah.
That's a special place for me up there, Mm-hmm. And then go up the Icefields Parkway from Lake Louise and stopping at all the spectacular stopping points, waterfalls, ice fields, and all that fabulous rushing rivers, and just an unbelievable place. And then there's up at the northern end, as you get closer to Jasper, there's this super beautiful little place to stay with cabins, and it just is gorgeous. And literally herds of elk hanging out there, and go up through there. Then eventually head up to Alaska to the Arctic Circle.
Oh, yeah.
Come back and maybe, I don't know about. I think it'd be kind of fun to ride the ferry back down, but I don't know. It's really expensive the last I looked, and at least come down maybe to Prince Rupert, and then catch the ferry over to Vancouver Island, and then come back that way.
Well, you'd have to say I had a critter at that point.
Absolutely, but that's just a common ride. People do those all the time, but I'd like to do that.
Yeah, that sounds. So Arctic Circle, would you continue all the way up to Prudhoe Bay, all the way up to the Arctic Ocean?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
So I figure, we were talking about doing it this year.
Yeah, we were.
But we got sidetracked.
Yeah.
But even just because, you've got to work and pay the bills. So even a quick jaunt up, if we can get some people together and go up to Lake Louise and up through there, it's drop dead gorgeous.
So you just made that comment. We're probably going to start getting messages about people wanting to go with us to Lake Louise.
The more the merrier.
Yeah, start sending us messages. We'll get it planned up. We'll do a pancake feed at Lake Louise. That'd be pretty rad.
Yeah,
that's just stinking lootly. Well, that's pretty cool. Well, it is 4:47 at night here. We've been going for 2 hours and 9 minutes, and we have family dinner starting in 13 minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we got the grandbaby, your great granddaughter, coming over, and Justice Shelby. They're all coming over. So we should probably just go ahead and end it here then. You'll probably be you'll be on again. I know that at some point. So, I thought it was great. I thought, I thought it was a pretty good little conversation. I like talking about the Tektronix stuff too, learning more about that.
Totally fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, do you want to give out your Instagram or do you want to keep that a secret?
Do I have an Instagram?
Well, yeah, you do.
I watch you guys. I mean,
right.
I want to see everybody else.
Here's the thing. Okay, so if you've made it this far into this program, go down below. Whether you're listening to this on Spotify, I don't know if you can leave comments on Spotify. Probably. Anyway, Spotify or the Instagrams, go down and leave a comment and let us know if PODcakes needs to start a PODcakes Instagram page. All things motorcycles that are PODcakes related.
Yeah, in fact, it's been so long since I obviously have an account to, at least I think I do.
You do.
To look at your guys' stuff. And but I don't really post anything or anything like that. So, maybe...
Yeah,
maybe I'll have to do that.
Here we go, everybody. So leave that comment down below. Make sure you tell PODcakes to get the PODcakes Instagram going. I think that would be, awesome. All things PODcakes. And real quick, like we went to GL, and I just called you Pops forever, and then I was just Ian, and then all of a sudden we show up, and it's like, oh, that's Pancakes and PODcakes. And apparently that's our name. That works. Yep, that's our name from now on. So,
all right. Hey, speaking of names,
I
just wanted to mention, since we're going to be going up to Vancouver Island in September, that I think that Mixed Nuts is about the coolest name for a riding group up there.
Dude,
and
absolutely.
The people in that group look just sensational.
Oh, they absolutely are. The Mixed Nuts. And if you don't know, I am the honorary Oregon chapter of the Mixed Nuts.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, they gave me a sticker, which is on the ad. It's on one of the forks. And they were like, yeah, you're a part. Because I went up there to the Easter Giver and rode that with all of them and met everybody was... That's really where the word fantastic started like really getting out of control, was up there, because I was having such an amazing time. I didn't know what other word would fit. And my mind was just going so fast, trying to be in this moment with all these people and this ride and this new scenery. I'm in a different country. And it was just, everything just bombarded myself. And I was just like, this is fantastic. That's fantastic. These are fantastic people. And that's fantastic. I was just like, dude, learn new words. And then it was just, it's in my head. And then it just started coming out in other videos. But that's really where it started. And you are absolutely right. And the Mixed Nuts, it's like riding up here. Everybody's from a little bit of a different background, and they just get together, and they're all fantastic for sure. And you're going to meet them. We're here in 6 weeks.
Yep. And I also think it's super cool to ride with women.
Yeah.
Because it's so often we're just a bunch of guys. Mm-hmm. I'd love to see the ladies getting out there and doing it too.
Well, you're going to meet, I don't know who's all going to be up there, but I know this girl Tracy's going to be there. I know Summer's going to be there. Dual Wanderers. I forget your name, but I think she's going to be there. I can't remember her name. I'm sorry. Anyways, there's going to be a bunch of ladies up there riding. And, I know that Summer doesn't like a lot of credit or being talked about, or she's really an introvert and stuff, but she's freaking awesome. She deserves so much credit, and the stuff she does on the backside. She does like charity rides, and she puts everything together, and the work that she does. It's just people need to recognize what Summer does, right? So Summer Hurst, you're an amazing person. You and Kevin and Critter up there, but we all see what you do individually, especially for like women's stuff. For ovarian cancer, I believe is what one of the rides she does. I think it's ovarian cancer, but she does a ride like that, and it's spectacular. So you're going to hang out with these people, and apparently there's grizzly bears up there. Who would have thunk it? That's what we need bear spray for.
I'll pass on the grizzly bear thing. Yeah.
All right. Well, there we are, everybody. That is another episode of Motorcycles and PODcakes, and we out.